Now, I'm not the best of models, but the T-shirt I've got on um, was designed for this rally and the rally down in Oregon. And we do have a few left from the Oregon rally. Oregon did pretty good at selling them down there. The right down here, they are with a $15 donation. Get you the T-shirt. So when you get a chance, in between or at the picnic, come on down and pick yourself out one. Oh yes, also for the South Sound Civil Defense Group, who's given us coffee and water this morning, getting us fired up, has a donation can as well for their efforts, and we really do appreciate them. They do a great job for us and give us the tents and setups and stuff like that. Our next speaker that I'd like to introduce is Marty McClendon. He's our candidate for Lieutenant Governor. And a couple things that I like, well, there's a lot of things, but a couple things that I'd like to point out is that he is not a career politician. And for me, I really like that. We definitely, as we watch, as we watch campaigns going on, especially some of the more high-profile ones, there are some politicians that is their job. Is they've always wanted to do it. They're going to stay there, and they don't see a reason to leave. I like people that are willing to step up and say, "There's a need, and I'll step up," and that's what Marty's doing. So with that, I'd like to turn the mic over to him real quick and let him say a few things.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for coming out today as well. I'll start off by just saying our prayers do go out for the 4 lives that were lost up there. It's tragedy, and every life is valuable, as we know that. So it's a sad tragedy. 5 lives. So definitely pray for their family and be with them. And obviously, this is part of why we serve, is to make sure less of this happens. So. I will say that as well, though, that I was in North Carolina a year ago, before I get started on what I'm talking about, and there was a case study on there where one town had gun-free zones, and the next town over was encouraged to carry guns. Well, you can imagine, but the gun-free zone had high crime rates, high property crime. The town that's encouraged to have guns had no crime, no property crime. Because criminals go, hey, I'm smart enough to go to this town over here because they don't have any guns, right? They've actually broadcast it, so. Yeah, it's bigger than that. It's common sense as well. Our founding fathers, it amazes me how much wisdom they have. They look back, on a friend of mine who's running for judge said we had the wisdom of the ages, what worked and what didn't work. And they understood that we had to be a free people in order to love God, a free people to own property, and so forth. So when they came over here, they wanted to worship freely. They wanted to own property. Because if you own property, someone else didn't own it, right? You're free. But you also had to have a way of protecting that right. So our Constitution and Declaration of Independence was, right, life, liberty, and property originally, right? So how do you defend your life, your liberty, and your property if you don't have your Second Amendment rights? So it's like Rick said, it's your God-given right to defend yourself, but it's enumerated in our Constitution because it's that important. Because without that, all our other rights, which are being stolen before our nose, through legislation, through bureaucracies, through regulations, are gone. So this is our last defense. So, and one more thing before I start as well, it's one of those things where when it comes down to it, when you have this argument with people about gun rights, my wife is Filipino, I have 2 young daughters. If someone my size is coming after them in an alley, I want them to be trained and self-defend, be able to defend themselves, and they are. So I know that thank God that they have the ability and the right to carry and defend themselves against anybody with bring harm. Amen? All right. So a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of a people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Shall not be infringed. In December of 1791, these words were being pondered by the legislature of the state of Virginia. They, along with other states, understood the need to put limits on the federal government's power and delineate certain rights for the people. These words, the text of the Second Amendment, were accepted by Virginia as Virginia became the 10th and last necessary state to ratify our Bill of Rights. As a result of these first 10 amendments became supreme law of the land, and part of the United States Constitution. Contained within the Bill of Rights are many of these things that we Americans hold most dear. In fact, in these rights that help us define us as Americans and distinguish us in so many ways from other nations, it is here that the framers of our Constitution recognized our God-given rights to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures, the right to a speedy trial, protection from cruel and unusual punishment, and the right to keep and bear arms. Since the ratification of the Second Amendment, it has been accepted and upheld by courts, most recently the Heller case. And the Second Amendment protects, quote, an individual right to possess a firearm unconnected with service in a militia and to use that arm for traditional lawful purposes. Now, Justice Scalia, a Reagan appointee who just died in February, delivered the opinion of the court in the Heller case. He was joined by 4 other Republican appointees, Roberts, Kennedy, Thomas, and Alito, in the 5-4 decision. Today, with the recent death of Scalia and the replacements of certain justices by Obama, the court on the gun issue stands at 4-4. Had Obama's nomination of Merrick Garland been approved by the Senate, the anti-gun justices would have had a 5-4 majority. The Democrat appointees to the Supreme Court want to infringe your right to keep and bear arms. They want to redefine the Second Amendment. It would probably be best for you to hear it from them in their own words. So let me read to you from their dissent in the Heller case. As used in the Second Amendment, the words "the people" do not enlarge the right to keep and bear arms to encompass use or ownership of weapons outside the context of service in a well-regulated militia. So here's the problem. Today, the Bill Clinton and Barack Obama appointees to the High Court do not believe that you have a personal right to keep and bear arms. They say that, and I quote, the right to keep and bear arms protects only a right to possess and use firearms in connection with a service in a state-organized militia. Now, I know we have a few, but since militia era of the nation has been passed for many, many, many decades and over, and have standing arm, there's no reason for you to own guns in their argument, right? So there is currently a vacancy on the Supreme Court, which we all know. The next appointee to the Supreme Court of the United States will either support your right or they will infringe upon your right. Up until now, the plan of the anti-gun Democrats was to incrementally erode your rights. Now they're taking the gloves off. With the upcoming presidential election, Hillary Clinton had this to say on her website. Hillary believes the gun industry must be held accountable for violence perpetrated with their guns. This would be like holding alcohol or automobile manufacturers liable for drunk driving accidents, or holding donut shops responsible for making people fat, or holding soap companies responsible when people slip and get injured in the shower. It doesn't make any sense. If multi-million-dollar judgments are allowed against gun companies every time a person is shot or injured, gun manufacturing as we know it will quickly come to an end. Their next logical step will be to hold ammunition makers liable as well. These tactics are a backdoor that they are using to infringe upon our Second Amendment rights. Their version of the Second Amendment will be followed by a fast-talking announcer reading all the fine print that they create, right? Now remember, the Second Amendment, what it is your right, our right. Neither temporary politicians nor unelected bureaucrats should ever be able to vote away or regulate your rights. They are your rights, not suggestions. It is appropriate at this point to look at the Declaration of Independence, which remind us where the power of government comes from. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. My guess is that none of us here today want to give your consent to the government to infringe upon your gun rights, right? Right. Yeah. Now, as your next Lieutenant Governor, I promise to you that I will do everything in my power to uphold our Washington State Constitution. Let me read part of our Constitution that talks about gun rights. Article 1, Section 24 states clearly, the right of an individual citizen to bear arms in defense of himself or the state shall not be impaired. Let me read it again. The right of the individual citizen to bear arms in defense of himself or state shall not be impaired. The liberal argument against the Second Amendment cannot be used against our state constitution, period. Our state constitution is clear that an individual can use firearms for self-defense or any other legal purpose. As your next Lieutenant Governor, I will do everything I can to protect your gun rights as defined by the Second Amendment in the Constitution, the United States and the Constitution of Washington State. Now, here's the serious part. My opponent in this election is Cyrus Habib. He has been given an F rating from the National Rifle Association. I received an A grade from the NRA as well as their endorsement. It's interesting to see what an F grade means to the NRA. It is also interesting to see what kind of an F he received. So when I was in school, a 59% was an F, right? So here's NRA's definition of an F grade. It says, when someone gets an F, you are a, quote, true enemy of gun owners' rights, a consistent anti-gun candidate who always opposes gun owners' rights and or actively leads anti-gun legislative efforts or sponsors anti-gun legislation. Wow. So you think, well, a 59% F is really not that end of the world, right? Well, it can't be all that bad. But the fact is that votesmart.org says Cyrus Habib only received a 7% grade from the NRA.
Is he legal?
I know, right? Well, as your next lieutenant governor, I will work to help protect your gun rights. Here you go. Yep. Right, well, I don't know. We're all in this together, but voting alone will not get it done. We need to spread the word to all of our friends that if they care about their gun rights, this is a very important step in keeping them. We know with Bob Ferguson coming out and trying to ban high-round magazines and AR-15s. My opponents come out and said that he would basically ban all guns in the gallery, including concealed carries. And he's actually implemented or introduced legislation to give local jurisdictions the right to ban guns in certain areas as well. So we need to put a stop to that. So we need to do everything we can to elect people at all levels of government to protect our Second Amendment rights. If they can take the Second Amendment, then the rest of our rights will be in jeopardy. We know that. We've seen laws that restrict our freedoms and destroy our families, and the primary political battlefront is right here at the Second Amendment. If it fails, the rest will come shortly. So we need you to vote. We need you to make sure you're registered to vote. We need you to talk to friends and family. Tell everybody, as Rick was saying, tell 10, tell 20, and have them tell 20. Explain to them how more than ever our gun rights are at risk. So they asked me to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm finishing up here, but this is how important it is to me. I grew up in Eastern Washington, Quincy, Wenatchee, and Grand Coulee. I'm a small town guy. I grew up hunting, fishing, I was a Boy Scout, I'm an Eagle Scout. I understand what it is to love my neighbor, to love God, and to love this country. I understand that those men and women that fought so hard to protect our rights that we've been given to this nation, that we have the right to carry and bear arms, but we also have all the other rights because they fought for it and paid the ultimate price for it. It's really important. So I know, but growing up there, my grandfather was a farmer, and my other grandfather was a rancher. I went to the UW. I spent 13 years in healthcare where I worked in open heart surgery. Part of that, though, is dealing with crisis. We had literally from the point when someone coded to the point when we had to get them in surgery and operated on, we had about 10 minutes. And it was funny, we had to get them transferred, breathing, CPR, lined up, and ready to open in 10-minute period. And a lot of my coworkers would freak out, and I get calm. I go, now it's time to go to work. We have a job to do. We have a life to save. And it's those type of things when we're dealing with crises in our house, in our Senate here, in this country, we need people to say, okay, now it's time to go to work, right? And that was really cool. Yeah, thank you. But I remember there are some people that would say, oh, you take it too lightly. I said, look, you have wasted energy. You're wasting time doing all the stuff, focusing on things that don't matter, when we have to have a lot of people that are hurting or people that need to live. Let's get to the job at hand. So anyway, and then I spent the last 17 years in real estate. I've been the last 3 years pastoring a church as well, and the last 2 years on radio in Seattle, AM 1590, I have a program heard nightly from 5 to 6 p.m., where our message really is that everybody has a God-given talent. Get engaged, get involved. You can make a difference right where you are, defending those liberties that we have, but also making sure your neighbors are informed, and we have a future to leave for our kids and grandkids, right?
Amen.
So as your lieutenant governor, if elected, and if you guys help me out with this, not only will we defend your rights, we'll make sure that justice is equal across the board, no one's above the law, and that we will actually bring common sense solutions down to the local level and hold government accountable. Thank you. So, thanks so much for having me here today. Please check out our website at electmarty.com. You see all the signs around here. I'm blessed to have so much help. It's great. You can volunteer, you can donate. We have a lot of work to do. We have less than 45 days to go. And we've been outspent $700,000 to like $40,000. It's crazy. But a conservative Christian gun rights advocate candidate from Eastern Washington can win a statewide office, and we can make it happen, right? All right, God bless.